Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would commentate on this video and this topic that I found very particularly interesting. And for those of you that did not end up seeing this video or seeing this interview, I believe that there was an interview that I personally talked about, but I also talked about while reviewing a video by that of Boxing Ego. And this is going to be another video by that of Boxing Ego. Well, Oscar De La Hoya, who of course was the former promoter of that of Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez, he was asked in a recent interview, I believe probably about a couple of weeks ago, maybe a little bit longer, shorter, give or take. But Oscar De La Hoya was recently asked about the possibility of there being a Canelo Alvarez versus Dmitry Bivol rematch and who he thought would potentially win that fight. And Oscar De La Hoya stated that in his view, a Canelo Alvarez style will not beat that of a Dmitry Bivol style. So, of course, basically what he said is that he believes that Dmitry Bivol will more than likely win that of the rematch. Now, of course, this is going to be a video by Boxing Ego, and Oscar De La Hoya, of course, also made the statement. And when it comes to Canelo Alvarez, you have to take both of these guys' statement with a little bit of a grain of salt, because neither of them have been known to really like Canelo Alvarez that much in the past. It just is what it is. But I do think that both Oscar De La Hoya and Mr. Boxing Ego in this video, that they did bring up some points that I would technically agree with. Once again, Oscar and that Canelo Alvarez relationship, especially when they ended as promoter and fighter, when they worked together, it did not end up very well. And both Canelo Alvarez and Oscar De La Hoya, they did not end up very cordial. They did not end up very well. They both said a multitude of derogatory things towards each other. Maybe, some being a little bit true for both ends. I'm not quite sure. But either way, Boxing Ego is going to talk about in his potential who he believes is going to win the rematch between that of Canelo Alvarez and Dmitry Bivol, and where does Canelo Alvarez's career go from here. And of course, this is even an even bigger topic of conversation after that of last night, because of course the Caleb Plant versus David Benavidez fight did occur, and David Benavidez, who of course is one of the fighters that many people want to see face out of Canelo Alvarez. The David Benavidez fight was a very interesting fight, and he was able to beat that of Caleb Plant, who of course was the former opponent of Canelo Alvarez. So Canelo is going to have to get in the ring with some of those fighters. He is going to have to get in the ring more than likely with Dmitry Bivol if he wants to try and reclaim his number one pound-for-pound spot. He's also going to have to get in the ring with Charlo, possibly Andrade, and also that of David Benavidez. And some people may say, well, why do you say possibly Andrade? How come you never say definitively Andrade? Because I think that Canelo, even though of course that would be a great fight, he might be able to get away with not facing that of Andrade, because Andrade just probably does not have as big of a fan base as some of those other fighters. I would personally love to see the fight, because I think it's another great top contender that Canelo could face that he's fought many times in his career. At least when I talk about the multitude of contenders that he's fought, that's basically what I mean by that. But Andrade, unfortunately for himself, he probably has the least amount of a fan base and least amount of marketing appeal out of any of those fighters. So we'll see if that fight actually does occur. I could easily see the Charlo and the Benavidez fights occurring. I do believe that the Dmitry Bivol rematch will occur. I've stated that a multitude of times after that of the John Ryder fight, if Dmitry Bivol does want to accept that fight, because he may want to move on to Artur Bivol or another fight. We'll see what happens with that. But we'll see. We'll see. It'll be interesting. But the big question is, once again, is that will Canelo Alvarez, does he actually have a chance against that of Dmitry Bivol in the rematch? Can he actually win? And after that, if he does possibly lose to Dmitry Bivol, where does his career go from there? So that's going to be the big question. But anyways, Boxing Ego is going to talk about it. Let's get into it.
Oscar De La Hoya keeping it a stack says Canelo just can't beat Dmitry Bivol. 68-75 don't matter. What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego on the back some boxing. Listen, Oscar De La Hoya been very candid. He's no longer obviously promoting Canelo directly, so he's just been steak and potatoes. And he says that Canelo will never beat Dmitry Bivol.
Well, with Oscar De La Hoya, at least at times, what he's been is that, in my view, he said some statements that were probably a little bit more authentic. And do I believe that De La Hoya believes that Bivol will beat Canelo Alvarez? Yes, I do. Is Oscar De La Hoya more than likely probably rooting for Canelo Alvarez to lose that fight secretly behind closed doors because he wants Canelo Alvarez to not be as successful when he's no longer with him? Of course he does. I don't think that that's a question, and I think that most promoters probably feel the same way about certain fighters, especially when the relationship ends that badly.
He says, quote, look, styles make fights, and I've always said a Canelo style will never beat a Dmitry Bivol style. It's written on stone. I think he's basically.
Well, what I'm going to say is this. I'm not going to say that anything is written in stone. Nothing is ever written in stone in terms of boxing, especially. But what I am going to say is this, and I've said this a multitude of times. I do not see Canelo Alvarez beating Dmitry Bivol in the rematch. It isn't that Canelo Alvarez is not a greatly skilled fighter. He is a greatly skilled fighter. He is an all-time greatly skilled fighter, in my opinion, and he's also an all-time great fighter who's accomplished a lot in his career. But when you're talking about the build of Canelo Alvarez and the build of Dmitry Bivol, combined with both of their skill sets, Canelo Alvarez is getting in there with a fighter that probably, if we're talking about any other fighter, that would be more tailor-made to probably defeat a fighter like Canelo Alvarez with what he brings to the table. His name would be Dmitry Bivol. He has the better feet than Canelo Alvarez. That is the main advantage Dmitry Bivol would have over that of Canelo Alvarez. And on top of that, he has the size. And that really is the only major flaw that I see once again in Canelo Alvarez's game, which is that at times he can be very flat-footed and he doesn't always have the quickest of feet. He still moves in and out relatively well, but his feet still are a little bit of a problem. They're always going to be a problem. It just is what it is. But Canelo Alvarez, because he's so exceptional in every other category, he can usually get away with it. Against Dmitry Bivol, I'm not quite sure if he's going to be able to get away with that. Dmitry Bivol moves so quickly, and on top of that, he's a guy that can compete with Canelo Alvarez in terms of power. And there's not a lot of guys that, even sometimes a light heavyweight, that even can compete with Canelo Alvarez's power. Dmitry Bivol is a guy we just seen in the Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez match. Zurdo was a damn cruiserweight in there. Shit, he could have been a heavyweight in there against that of Dmitry Bivol, and Bivol was able to completely push him back, hurt him a multitude of times, and completely embarrass his ass. Now, I thought Canelo Alvarez, even when he was completely stumped of stamina, I thought that he even had a better performance against Bivol than what Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez did, because at least Canelo Alvarez won, you can say, about 3 to 4 rounds in that fight, even when he was completely gassed out after those first 4 rounds. Zurdo Ramirez, I think I gave him 1 round completely in that fight. So it just is what it is. But anyways, bottom line is this. It's going to be very hard, in my view, for Canelo Alvarez to beat Dmitry Bivol. It's not impossible. Nothing is ever impossible. But Canelo Alvarez, when you talk about the size limitation in this fight, and some people may say, well, that's just an excuse, because Canelo, he was able to beat Kovalev and blah, 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 and all these other guys. Right, but there's a difference. Let's just say if we're comparing another fight, there's a difference if Gervonta Tank Davis goes up to, let's just say, 140 pounds, and if he faces someone like a Teofimo Lopez or someone, say, like a Jack Catterall, and then faces someone like a Josh Taylor. that's just the way that it is. Sure, you can beat, the majority of the top guys that are probably a little bit bigger than you, but obviously when you get in the ring against a guy who's the debatable best in the division, is going to be different. Dmitry Bivol is a guy that, in my view, he probably was always more skilled than what a Sergey Kovalev was. He has better defense. He has faster hands. His power is comparable. Like I said, a lot of people, they take a look at Dmitry Bivol's, knockouts, and they're like, oh, he doesn't even have that many knockouts. He really doesn't have that much power. And I told people that he did have power, and people weren't listening to me, and I was proven correct again. Because once again, you can't just take a look at a fighter and say, oh, they have this X and X amount of knockouts. Sometimes it's because of the way the fighter fights. Dmitry Bivol is a defensive type of fighter. He likes to move back and forth. He likes to move in and outside of range. But when he needs to push you back, he can push you back. And he showed that against Canelo. He showed that against Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez. He's shown that against a multitude of other fighters. And Bivol can carry his own in the power department. Even David Benavidez, when he got in the ring with Bivol, he said he punches just as hard as Gennady Triple G Golovkin. So Bivol has that type of power. On top of that, he has very good defense. He's a guy that has fast hands, good power, and he has a high degree of boxing IQ and probably a high degree of confidence after coming off of Canelo with that victory, and also Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez. I'm not saying that Canelo cannot win the fight, but I would be surprised if he did. That's just my personal opinion. I give him about a 30% chance at most to beat Dmitry Bivol in a rematch, especially at 175. That's just my personal view, but we'll see what happens. And like I said, that's not really an insult. It's just how great, and on top of that, compared to the size advantage that he has, that's just me saying that Canelo Alvarez, even though with how greatly skilled that he is, it's just he's getting to the max of his limitations, and everyone has them in boxing. Eventually you're going to get to that weight class, and more than likely is going to stump you a little bit. And Canelo Alvarez right now, he's pretty much at his max. There is going to be no weight class that he can probably move up to higher. Maybe he could possibly win a belt at cruiserweight, possibly, because some of those fighters there are not as talented as the light heavyweight fighters, at least at the current moment in time. But other than that, I don't see Canelo Alvarez winning belts anywhere else. He is still a guy that is pretty much around a natural middleweight, maybe more of a natural 168 pounder because of the weight that he's gained. But other than that, Canelo, he's not as big as a lot of these guys. He wasn't even really as thick. He wasn't even really as big as what a Billy Joe Saunders, a Danny Jacobs, or what a Caleb Plant were, or a Callum Smith. So going up against Dmitry Bivol, yes, it's going to be a very tough task. So we'll see what happens.
Saying this.
But like I said before, out of any other fighter that is built around the same build as Canelo Alvarez, or started off from 154, 160, he has the best chance to possibly defeat Dmitry Bivol more than any other fighters that I see from 160 or 168. Better than Andre, better than Charlo, better than David Benavidez. That's the way that I see it. The only fighter other than Canelo that I would give it possibly a better than 30% chance to defeat Dmitry Bivol would be that of Artur Beterbiev. That's really about it.
In stone. And he says, I want to have him.
And some people have mentioned, well, like I believe I had one person yesterday when I talked about the David Benavidez and Caleb Plant fight. Some people said, well, why didn't you mention David Morrell? He's one of the top contenders. Well, he only has about 12 fights in his record, so I'm going to wait and see what happens with Mr. David Morrell, because in my view, he's still got some experience to go under. He's still very inexperienced. He still throws a bit sloppy. I got to see him against more elite opponents.
Have these major fights to continue building his legacy. You want to know, as a fighter, when you have those last fights in your career, you want to make the best of it. You want to fight the very best. End quote. Now, you got to respect this. Oscar De La Hoya has the career, so he could talk that talk, because he has the career and reputation as a fighter to back that up. Oscar ain't ducked no smoke from Ike Court.
Well, it depends on who you ask. And I was not really around during Oscar De La Hoya's time, so I can't really tell you that personally. And I haven't really done my proper research on the matters of when he was around. But depending on who you ask, depending on what Oscar De La Hoya says, people will say, oh, Oscar De La Hoya, he can say whatever he wants because he never ducked no smoke. But then as soon as Oscar says something that people don't like, they're like, oh, well, Oscar, he ducked Shane Mosley, he ducked this guy, he ducked that guy. So once again, I can't really tell you who Oscar ducked and who he didn't duck. What I can tell you is that Oscar fought a lot of great opponents in his career, and a lot of the times, Oscar De La Hoya, once he started moving up the weight classes, he started coming up short. What Oscar De La Hoya was, in my opinion, he was a great fighter. He was an all-time great fighter, but in my opinion, he's been more overrated than what he has been underrated. That's just my personal opinion. Oftentimes, I see Oscar De La Hoya in the top 10 of all time, or even in the top 20 of all time. That's not really where Oscar De La Hoya belongs. You're talking about a guy that lost to Sugar Shane Mosley twice. Now, the last time I watched the second fight, I thought Oscar should have won the second fight. But you're talking about a guy that moved to 135 all the way up to 147. You should have never lost to that guy in the first place. That would be like if Terrence Bud Crawford or Earl Spence Jr. moved up to 160 out of nowhere and fought Canelo Alvarez. Do you think that they would beat Canelo Alvarez? In my opinion, it would be highly doubtful. Sorry, and I've told people this before. Oscar De La Hoya is not on the level in terms of skill set or in terms of greatness as a Canelo Alvarez. A lot of people say, what the hell are you talking about? That's buffoonery. No, it's not buffoonery at all. Actually, it's a very logical and objective view. Because when you take a look at Oscar De La Hoya, what did he really do in terms of winning the biggest fights of his career compared to Canelo Alvarez? Because a lot of people, of course, they love to say, oh, well, Canelo, he had controversial decisions. Oscar De La Hoya had certain controversial decisions as well. A lot of people don't believe that he beat Felix Sturm. A lot of people don't really truly believe that he beat Ike Corte. A lot of people don't even believe that he beat Pernell Sweepy Whitaker. So we can go to that same thing with Oscar De La Hoya as well. Bottom line is this. When Oscar De La Hoya started moving up the weight classes, he really got a taste of what it was like to finally face fighters that could really handle his own size and truly compete with him. Now, the Felix Tito Trinidad, in my opinion, that fight, it was a bit controversial. You could also argue that Oscar gave it away because he didn't throw enough in the final 4 rounds. But other than that, he did lose to that of a Sugar Shane Mosley. Just is what it is. He did lose to Floyd Mayweather. He did lose to some other guys. And a lot of the times, he would come up a bit more shorter than what he probably needed to. That's why I said Oscar De La Hoya, he's not really on the level, in my opinion, of a Canelo Alvarez. He's more on the level of a Sugar Shane Mosley, a Miguel Cotto, those type of guys. Still great fighters, all-time great fighters, but not fighters that I would have in my top 10 or top 20. I think Oscar De La Hoya's reputation, in my opinion, I think it's been a little bit more of image than what it actually has been of substance, at least in terms of his resume. And some people may say, well, I believe the same thing about Canelo Alvarez. You can argue that Canelo Alvarez's brand, that it has helped him. But when we still talk about Canelo Alvarez, he's won the majority of the big fights in his career. He beat Sergey Kovalev. He beat that of Danny Jacobs. He beat Gennady Golovkin. He beat Arasani Lara. He beat the majority of those guys. All right, so it just is what it is. A lot of people, once again, when I said that Canelo, in my view, that he was better and greater than De La Hoya, a lot of people took a look at me like I was crazy. That's just the truth. It is what it is. Now, if you want to talk about other fighters that maybe Canelo would not be greater than, or maybe around the same level, maybe if we were to talk about someone like a Andre Ward, or maybe someone like a Bernard Hopkins, Joe Calzaghe, because that's around the level, in my opinion, where he's at. He's comparable to those fighters. And I would probably put him above some of those fighters, just in terms of accomplishments, But Oscar, no.
To Pernell Whitaker, to Julio Cesar Chavez, to Manny Pacquiao, to Floyd, Bernard Hopkins, Felix Tito Trinidad, Shane Mosley twice, Arturo Gatti. I mean, Hector Camacho. The man ain't duck no smoke. I mean, these, as I said, like nothing but legends. That's not even including like Felix Sturms and some of his other fights. De La Hoya was one of them ones. He was one of them boys. Ricardo Mayorga, right? And had great.
Once again, when we really talk about the biggest wins of Oscar De La Hoya's career, he fought a Julio Cesar Chavez, which, let's be real, who was way, way, way smaller than him. And a lot of people, they're probably going to think that I'm quote-unquote hating on Oscar De La Hoya. Once again, Oscar De La Hoya, and there's a lot of fighters that are like this, he was one of those fighters that did very well in divisions that he should have never been in the first place. Oscar De La Hoya, I believe, in his career started at about 135. When he beat Chavez, Chavez was never even a natural 135 pounder. And when you take a look at Oscar De La Hoya, he was bigger in every category. He was way lengthier. He was obviously heavier. He was the younger fighter. So a lot of people, they, when I make the comparison of De La Hoya versus Canelo Alvarez, they say, oh, what are you talking about? Because De La Hoya, he beat Chavez, when he was looked at as an all-time great fighter. Canelo couldn't beat Floyd Mayweather. Well, not only is Floyd Mayweather Jr., in my view, above that of Julio Cesar Chavez, and yes, Canelo was bigger than Floyd Mayweather Jr., but Floyd is on another level compared to that of Chavez. It is what it is. And there, once again, there's a reason why De La Hoya started moving up the weight classes, and then all of a sudden he started losing some more fights.
Performances in a lot of these fights as well. So for him to say this about Canelo, man, troubled times for Mr. Nello. And the Canelo, the Chupapi Muñeños, the Cinnabons, they want Canelo to be the face of boxing still so bad, but he keeps fighting British opponents, and the public has lost interest in the matchmaking style that he has right now. But I agree.
Well, allegedly for the public losing interest in Canelo Alvarez's fights, apparently the numbers look just fine. Because apparently the last time, in his last fight, it did over 1 million buys. So, once again, I need to see some concrete evidence for that. Now, I will agree that, in my opinion, the next fight, it's not a great fight against John Ryder. But it is a tune-up fight once again, because I think he is going to get in the ring with Dmitry Bivol right after that. But it is very clear that ego that he is preying on Mr. Canelo Alvarez's downfall. As of right now, Canelo Alvarez, he still is the face of boxing. You can like it, you can not like it. Now, when I say the face of boxing, I'm not talking about number one pound-for-pound fighter. I just mean the fighter that is still looked at as probably the most popular fighter in that of the boxing league. Just like if you take a look at, that of other sports right now in the NBA, the face of it, at least in terms of popularity, it still might be LeBron James or Steph Curry, something like that. But right now, well, Steph Curry you could debate as the best player if you really, really wanted to. But right now, this season, I wouldn't debate that. But Nikola Jokic or Giannis Antetokounmpo and Joel Embiid, throw them in there. They're probably the three of them having the best seasons. Right now, in my view, Jokic would probably deserve the MVP, but Giannis has a strong consideration, and Embiid would probably be in a little bit of a distant third, but close. But it really depends on the league that you're watching. And Canelo is one of those guys. He just has a great amount of name power. He has a great amount of star power. People can like that, they cannot like that. But as of right now, yes, he still is the face of boxing. Just like Oscar De La Hoya when he fought Floyd, Oscar wasn't the number one pound for pound fighter when Floyd Mayweather Jr. fought Oscar De La Hoya, but Floyd knew because of his star power and because he was one of the faces of boxing or the face of boxing that after he beat Oscar De La Hoya, that he was going to be the A side for the rest of his career.
Him when it comes to Dmitry Bivol. I really don't want to see the fight at 168 because I think that's unfair. Canelo took his butt up to fight Kovalev at 75 when he knew Kovalev was washed and he had a tough fight with Anthony Yard in a quick turnaround, and he had no problems doing it, right? He just put a rehydration clause on the boy Kovalev. That's why the fight looked FAF, all things considered.
Well, you're saying FAF because let's be real, you're a hater of Canelo Alvarez. It just is what it is. And I'm not saying this because he's saying that he's about to lose to Dmitry Bivol, but it's very clear that ego has always been a detractor of Canelo Alvarez because he still goes on the pro-black narrative of we can't have Canelo Alvarez as the number one pound for pound fighter. And he goes after certain other fighters as well, like that of a Fury and Lomachenko and blah, blah, blah. And that's not me saying that some of those guys don't deserve criticism here and there, but ego is a part of new media / CLDBC. And anyone who, gives themselves that label, that tells me what they're already a part of.
Then he felt emboldened and brazen and felt he could beat Bivol at 175, and he came up mad short and then lied about it. Post-fight, Canelo Alvarez says he thought he won the fight. I mean, I don't know how. I understand emotions run high and stuff, but I mean, realistically speaking, I think that's cap. I don't see how Canelo. You
Well, I think it's possible that Canelo Alvarez, right after the fight, maybe thought, maybe I could have won it, blah, blah, blah. Because fighters, of course, they always have that bravado and they always have a little bit of delusion. And sometimes in a fight, it's a little bit tough to see, who they thought won. We've seen it before. Adrian Broner, even though, of course, he's very delusional. We remember in the Manny Pacquiao fight that he said, hey, I beat that boy and all sort of shit. And I believe that Adrian Broner was serious. I think that he more than likely did think that he probably would beat Manny Pacquiao. He was dead wrong, just like Canelo Alvarez was wrong here. But there's a possibility that he thought it was real. But very shortly after, Canelo Alvarez, I think, probably rewatched the tape and rewatched the fight. And he said, no, I just didn't really do enough. And I think Canelo Alvarez has accepted that. I haven't heard at least that many excuses from Canelo Alvarez. Maybe there's been a few. I can't really remember what they were. But Canelo Alvarez is going to have to accept viability. He is going to have to accept the truth, which is that his stamina was awful in that first fight and that he's going to have to be much better. He's going to have to show Dmitry Bivol that he is a big threat in that rematch. He's going to have to come forward, in my opinion, the whole time. He's going to have to really make him uncomfortable.
know as a human, as a competitor, when somebody whoop you or beat you. Like, I mean, you know if you won something or you didn't. Like, you could be a
Well, not always immediately, but I understand what you're saying.
figure skater and let's say it's couples figure skating and a couple went and their performance was flawless and you made a couple mistakes, you know that they beat you and they're probably going to medal. Like, it's just a feeling. If you've ever done anything competitive,
Yes, but boxing is a little bit of a different sport because you don't just get to do your performance and then sit back and watch another person's performance. It isn't like that in boxing until after the fight. Until you watch the tape, it's a little bit different because you're in the moment.
you know when you've been bested, right? So I highly doubt the fight I seen. I barely even gave Canelo any rounds. So in his
I think I gave him about four, which I think is fair. But after those first 4 rounds, Canelo Alvarez was completely gassed. So his stamina is going to have to be way, 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 way better. And in my opinion, even if his stamina is better, it's still going to be a very uphill battle. even for how great of a fighter Canelo Alvarez is. This is a fighter that is bigger than you. This is a fighter that can compete with you blow for blow in terms of power. This is a fighter that, in my view, was always going to have a type of style that was always going to have a great chance over you anyway. So this is going to be a very uphill battle. If Canelo was actually able to beat Dmitry Bivol in the rematch, I'd be very heavily surprised. In fact, if he was actually able to beat Dmitry Bivol, he might have to enter into my top 20 fighters of all time.
Mind even, unless he's a complete narcissist, I don't see how he could have imagined he won. So he probably just said that out of shame and embarrassment because he got schooled up by Dmitry B.
Isn't that interesting how he calls Canelo Alvarez a narcissist? But Deontay Wilder, when he was saying all these delusional things against Tyson Fury, he was not a narcissist. He was a guy that, oh, well, I just don't agree with everything that he says. Or, oh, Deontay Wilder, he probably did get cheated, all sort of bullshit. Isn't that interesting who's labeled a narcissist and who isn't? Now, Deontay Wilder, in my view, shows a great amount more of narcissism than what Canelo Alvarez does. Canelo doesn't really come across to me as a narcissist. Now, I could be wrong, but what Canelo does come across to me as is a highly confident athlete, is someone that does here and there have a high level of delusion, which all high level athletes do. As Muhammad Ali once said, I had to believe that I was the best before I even was. And I think Canelo Alvarez, because he's an all-time great fighter, he has that same level of delusion. I wouldn't say narcissism necessarily. Narcissism is what I seen with Deontay Wilder, with him getting rid of a trainer where he had no proof whatsoever, and the type of bullshit that he was saying against Tyson Fury with no proof whatsoever. That was narcissism. What Canelo Alvarez was saying, in my view, was not narcissism, but it was delusion. And I think Canelo Alvarez eventually did even realize himself that no, he probably did not win that fight. But we'll see what happens.
Now your former promoter, De La Hoya, who's worked with you, and again has an illustrious career, he's saying you can't beat Bivol, and it could be true. I mean, obviously we don't know until they rematch.
I agree, it could be true, and more than likely it is true in my opinion. I don't go after De La Hoya for saying that because, in my view, there is a little bit of truth to that. I'm not really sure if Canelo's going to win this rematch. I hope he at least puts on a good showing because I like to see Canelo Alvarez perform well. I think he's an all-time great fighter, but I'm not quite sure if I see him beating this guy. I just think he's a little bit too big, combined with the skill and combined with the style. I just think it's a very, very bad matchup for Canelo Alvarez.
But I will say this, as somebody who looks and tends to look at the facts. There's nothing that he showed
Well, you tend to look at the facts that you like to look at. Anyway,
me in the first fight that leads me to believe a second fight would be different. Now I'm human. I could make mistakes. I could be wrong. I don't think I will be wrong. I think
I don't think you will be either. And more importantly, I don't think I will be either because I don't see Canelo Alvarez beating him. Once again, I wouldn't be shell shocked, but I would be surprised.
Bivol beats him. I think Canelo's best bet is to try to fight him at 68, which you could possibly drain him. I mean, he's probably like 30, 31 years old, never fought at that weight or hasn't in quite some time if he has. Because there was a point in time where Bivol was calling out Canelo when he was looking like more monstrous. And Bivol said he would go down, but then Canelo didn't fight him at those times. Years later, he finally fought him at 75. So to bring him down now is kind of cheesy to me, and it'll make Canelo look bad. If you said you beat Bivol at 175 in your mind, then fight him again at 175. Why are you trying to get A-side advantage? And another thing, I don't like.
Well, in my view, the best move for Canelo Alvarez's career would debatably be to fight him at 175 pounds. Because Dmitry Bivol, even though he is a natural light heavyweight, he is a guy that is a little bit lighter in terms of his build compared to that of Artur Beterbiev or some of the past light heavyweights. So he is a guy that could probably easily make 168 pounds without really being that much more drained. So if Canelo does lose the rematch, and if he loses the rematch at 168 pounds, is going to look, in my opinion, a certain amount more bad. Because then there's going to be nothing that Canelo Alvarez really has. He's not going to have any belts. And it probably will look better for his legacy to probably fight Dmitry Bivol at 175. So that's what I believe more than likely will happen. I think Canelo Alvarez believes that that's the best move. if he is going to try and reattempt to fight Dmitry Bivol. And in my opinion, that's probably the best move as well. But we'll see.
What that represents for the sport of boxing, because people always play this cap game where they'll say, oh, all you got to do is fight this A-side fighter, beat him, and then you know, you get all the perks of the A-sideness because you whooped him. But in boxing, we see that's cap because Andy Ruiz beat Anthony Joshua, and then the contract was heavily slanted towards AJ in the rematch even. AJ made more.
Yes, and that's boxing. Quit being a little hoe overall and complaining about the A side of things because it's not certain fighters that you don't like. Just stop. Because I promise you, if Deontay Wilder was in a position like this, or Gervonta Tank Davis, if Gervonta Tank Davis loses that rematch, or excuse me, if he quote unquote loses that match against Ryan Garcia, let's just say, and Ryan Garcia asks for A side stuff, Boxing Ego is not going to be complaining. So it is what it is. That's called business. That's called boxing. There's A-level fighters in terms of A side. Canelo Alvarez is one of those fighters. He has a great amount of star appeal. When you talk about the negotiations, it's not always about who wins the first fight. It's about who has more appeal, who's worth more money. That's what it's about.
Money than Ruiz in the rematch. AJ got to pick the location and wanted it in Saudi Arabia, where Andy Ruiz said Mexico, LA, or Vegas, and or New York again, and Joshua didn't want. So boxing's capped with that. They always say that just beat the guy, oh, beat the guy and to become the guy, but it doesn't work like that because Bivol beat the brakes off of Canelo, just like Floyd did, and Bivol, you still trying to A side him. You having the
Because he still is the A side. And once again, like I said, if this were a Gervonta Tank Davis situation or a Deontay Wilder, trust me, he would have no issue with it. So just shut the fuck up and accept that Canelo Alvarez is the A side. That's how boxing works. It's how it's always worked. It just is what it is. There's a reason why there's rematch clauses. Because what that basically says is that when I give you the opportunity to face me, then you're going to have to give me the opportunity to once again still have my advantages in the rematch because I'm giving you the opportunity to face me because I'm the biggest star in boxing. All right, that's how it works. Or I'm the biggest star. That's how it works.
luxury of fighting him at your custom weight of 168 shouldn't be a thing because he's the champion and he beat you. So that I don't like what that represents. I really don't. I
What
think
it represents is a smart business move for overall your bigger assets and for your bigger stars in all of boxing. That's all that is.
if Canelo has some nuts and he wants to right his wrong, he got to fight him at 75. But you know how
Well, I think that would be the better move for his career. But we'll see.
boxing works and you know how Canelo works. So I wouldn't be
And once again, it's very interesting how he mentions that Canelo, he had this rehydration clause with that of Sergey Kovalev and blah, 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 and all this other stuff. But these guys, they never mention how Gervonta Tank Davis, he has a catchweight clause with that of Ryan Garcia. You know, the same guy that talks all this shit about how he can beat, Josh Taylor in the 140 pounders, but then against a real threat in terms of Ryan Garcia, he catchweights him. Ain't that interesting? And listen, I don't mind that at all. I don't really mind it. But a lot of these guys, once again, they love to talk shit on Canelo Alvarez and all these other fighters they don't like. Well, if you're talking shit about Canelo Alvarez and if you allegedly don't like all this A-side bullshit and you're saying how Canelo Alvarez doesn't have a pair of balls, why don't we talk about Gervonta Tank Davis? Because he's doing a lot of the same shit. He's fighting guys that a lot of the times really don't belong in the ring with him. And then in the biggest fight of his career, he's fighting at a catchweight. When he said that apparently he can beat Josh Taylor, so why not fight Ryan Garcia overall with him going to 140? Why is there a catchweight? But once again, I understand the business side of boxing, so I don't have a problem with it. That just happens, especially in some of your bigger fights. But once again, if you're going to criticize Canelo Alvarez, then be consistent. But we know we're not going to see that from Mr. Ego. Is no offense, like I said, I don't think that he is necessarily the worst commentator, but a lot of his bias does show through.
surprised if he tries to catch weight or tries to bring him down to 168 because he's not confident. Just like I'm saying and De La Hoya is saying that styles make fights and Bivol should beat you again. So if he does choose a weight other than 175, then that shows me that Canelo's not confident in beating him. Canelo's career
Well, I think it would show that Canelo Alvarez realizes at 175 pounds that pretty much is his max. that he's not, that he's really pushing his limits.
Could very well be over if he loses to Bivol. And when I say over, I'm not saying he can't box anymore, but him being called the face of boxing, that's rapidly deteriorating, and no one's going to believe that. It's like
If he loses to Dmitry Bivol, I would agree. It would almost be like a Conor McGregor situation, to where he would still be one of the faces of boxing, and all in all, he still might be the most popular face, at least when you talk about certain numbers. But it would be dwindling. It would be like Conor McGregor after he lost that Khabib Nurmagomedov rematch, or excuse me, that first fight, and then ended up losing to Dustin Poirier. It would start to look okay. Well, he can't really be called the face of the UFC anymore, or at least, he's not really there in terms of the top five pound per pound. I would agree with that, even if he does potentially beat that of David Benavidez and Andrade and that of Charlo. Maybe he could remain there in the top five if he beats those guys, but in my view, those guys are not on the same level as a Dmitry Bivol.
Joshua. There's a couple guys in boxing like that, like Anthony Joshua. He just lost two in a row to a smaller Usyk. If he loses to Jermaine Franklin, then his career is going to be in shambles. You got a yet
I agree with that.
another new coach, and if you lose to a guy that people are expecting you to be the favorite against, people, your career will suffer. And I think even for AJ, it already has suffered because they're saying the ticket sales have been slow. Back in the day, they were saying
And keep in mind that Boxing Ego is a guy that does not like AJ Anthony Joshua. All right, he is a British black fighter. They're not usually the biggest fans of certain British black fighters because a lot of the times they're very competitive with the American black fighters. Mr. Ego, as well as Dante's Boxing Nation, they've been on Deontay Wilder's nutsack for the better part of the past 10 years when it comes down to it. So Anthony Joshua is still an enemy. All right, Tyson Fury is now the biggest enemy of all because he whooped his ass, and now they want to try and degrade him at every turn. And you see that with Ego's whole ass trying to degrade Tyson Fury at every turn. No offense against him, but it just is what it is. What it is. He always tries to tear down Tyson Fury at every turn and still tries to allege that he cheated in that fight without any evidence whatsoever. As I've always said, that there was no evidence. Anyways, no concrete evidence, that is. But when it comes down to it, like I said, he will still degrade those certain fighters like Anthony Joshua.
Joshua sold out Wembley and sold out O2 Arena in 5 minutes. What happened to all that? Now. But anyway, back to the Canelo. We'll see if he even takes the Bivol fight. He's already showing me he's not confident.
But yet, I don't think he addressed the Deontay Wilder versus Robert Lenius pay-per-view numbers. Once again, Mr. Ego and a lot of these guys, they love to talk all this shit about how certain fighters, oh, their numbers are dwindling and all this other shit, blah, blah, blah. When it comes down to, take a look at their numbers, they're dwindling. But then when it comes to the fighters that they like, when their numbers bomb, like a Gervonta Tank Davis or a Deontay Wilder, all of a sudden people are hating. Why are you pocket watching? You remember that one video not too long ago that I reviewed last year when it came to the Isaac Pitbull Cruz and Gervonta Tank Davis fight, or maybe it was a couple years ago. I can't remember. And Mr. Ego was like, "Why are you pocket watching? Why are you guys watching after his money?" All Ego does is pocket watch. All he does is that. When you talk about boxing, it's a part of your job to talk about certain pay per view numbers. That's how it is. But once again, that goes to show you that Ego, and it's no offense against him, I think that all in all, he's a very good analyzer. I think he brings up a lot of good points a lot of the times, but he's a big fanboy just like everybody else, or at least like the majority of other big fanboys.
Beating Bivol, because if he was, he would have did an immediate rematch, like Jermell Charlo. People said, "Oh, you didn't."
I would agree with that, and I think that shows me that Canelo did the smart thing, and he realized that he's going to need a little bit more adjustments in order to defeat that of Dmitry Bivol, and I actually think that that's a good sign for Canelo Alvarez. We'll see what happens.
Beat Castano, you didn't beat Harrison. He signed up for immediate rematches. Floyd Mayweather, some people said, oh, the Maidana fight was too close. Castillo fight, immediate rematch. Sugar Ray Leonard when he lost to Roberto Duran. All these great black American fighters that I just listed, all of them have fights where there was some controversy. Andre Ward Kovalev. Some people said he didn't win. Ward showed you who he was, did the immediate rematch, and came back and stopped Kovalev and ended on a high note. That's what you do if you're really confident and you know you could beat someone. not what Canelo does.
Well, in my opinion, I somewhat agree with that. But Canelo Alvarez didn't have a close fight with Dmitry Bivol. So once again, I'm not really going to go after him that much because Canelo Alvarez, in my view, what the smarter thing to do was to really get in the ring with a couple of other fighters, try to get your mojo back, try to have a couple of tune-up fights, and then try to get back in the ring with Dmitry Bivol. Maybe it would have benefited him more to possibly get in the ring with another light heavyweight to practice his abilities. But, Canelo Alvarez, I think that he did the right thing. Once again, when Deontay Wilder got back in the ring with Tyson Fury, there were so many people saying, oh, so many people, they're afraid because, they know Tyson Fury is going to lose, and Boxing Ego is one of those guys. In my view, and I always stated this, it was not a good idea for Deontay Wilder to get straight back in the ring with Tyson Fury because it was way too short of a time. You had no ability to grow and reflect on your loss. You had no ability to really grow as a man and grow as a fighter. And Canelo Alvarez has had a little bit of that time. Now, will it matter? In my view, probably not. I think Dmitry Bivol is still going to be too much, but we'll see.
Checkmate. I'm out. Introducing.
But anyways, that's really about it for today. I thought Ego brought up some interesting points that I would agree with. Is he clearly hoping that Canelo loses a rematch? Yes, he is. Do I also think that he believes in his breakdown that Bivol will beat him? Yes, and I do too. I believe Bivol will beat him too. But we'll see what happens. It'll be very interesting to see what Canelo Alvarez does within these next few years and where he ranks amongst the greats. Because in my opinion, like I said, he's already within my top 30 fighters of all time. Just my personal view of things. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see what happens with Mr. Canelo Alvarez at the end of the year. But that's pretty much about it. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.